Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Hayley Spira-Bauer. Welcome back, everybody, to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. I am so excited to be recording another episode of our Rural Schools mini-series. Today, I have two incredible guests. I have Richard Wright, the superintendent of Agua Dulce ISD. Welcome, Richard.
Hello, it's good to be here, young lady.
It's so good to have you here, and I want to thank you for coming and taking time out of your busy day for joining us.
Hey, I'm just missing lunch duty, that's all, so life is good. You're keeping me away from the junior high cafeteria, so it's awesome.
Oh, I've been in that junior high cafeteria. I think we have a lot to talk about there today. Well, I also want to thank Michael Gonzalez, the Executive Director of Rural School Innovation Zone, for being here today and for introducing me to Mr. Richard Wright. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you for having us.
You know, I know today is going to be a good conversation because before this recording even started, I heard a little story about how Richard was driving a bus this morning, which I feel like really encapsulates some of what our conversation will be about. But I'm going to save that for a little bit. And I want to start off with my standard first question on the podcast, which is, how did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself? Richard, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, mine's easy. I actually had a great family growing up, father that I looked up to, mother that I looked up to, and they always taught me to pay attention to the people around you and surround yourself with the people you'd like to be. And so as I went through the military, went through college and everything else, that's what I did. So there were several key people in my early education career that helped nudge me. They saw potential and nudged me in the proper direction because I didn't always make the best choices. There was one time at convocation, everybody's all dressed up and so excited, and my buddy and I show up in flip-flops and shorts and a t-shirt like we just left the beach. And the superintendent put a whole dress code for a 1,200 employee school district just because of my idiocy. So I had some wonderful teachers who helped me remember that I was a professional, and that's what I needed to do. But as I went through my career, had a penchant for learning and a penchant for leadership. And one of the biggest influences was God rest his soul, a man by the name of Gene Harrison. He was at a rural school in Moulton, Texas. And they were always successful, but they didn't do everything. He said, Richard, I can be successful in a few good things, or I can be mediocre in a lot. Now, which one would you prefer to be? I said, well, I'd like to be good in a few things, sir. And he goes, if you'll remember that, you'll be successful all out through your career. So basically, he told me don't bite off more than you can chew. And since then, that's the way things have operated in my career. And always don't be afraid to take a few risks and go for what you believe in, you know. And at the end of the day, the number one reason I'm here is because of kids. And I'm 57 years old and I still get to act like a kindergartner from time to time. Life doesn't get any better than that, man.
Well, I can't wait to uncover in this episode what your few good things are that you feel really excellent at and how that has contributed to the success of your school district. Thank you so much for sharing your background with us. Mike, how did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
Miss Hayley, great question. I first owe it to my parents. Both my parents extremely hardworking and instilled a work ethic in me to be the best person I possibly can be and to impact as many people as I could. And that was, again, there were prime examples. Having been raised in a very humble and poor environment, my dad always reached out to neighborhood kids to provide, resources that they didn't have, whether it be a shirt or a pair of shoes. And not that we had a lot, but he was always forthcoming with those kind of situations. And my mom, God bless her soul, was very patient and caring about the youth in our community. And I saw that. And so those kind of things were embedded in me to continue going on. And like I said, when I was thinking about a future career, of course, being a first generation student, I wanted to make money. So automatic lawyer was the way to go. And my dad always reverted back to education and how to impact and those things. So it took me 2.5 years to change my mind, but I did when I went to St. Mary's, and was very fortunate to be around some great people like Coach Meagle and Dr. Flores to impact my decision and going forward with education. But my mom and my dad were definitely lifesavers and were the mold that allowed me to be who I am today. And that's, through the zone and being executive director, I'm now getting a chance to impact 5 different communities, 4 different counties, and changing kids' lives one certification at a time.
What a powerful story. I always appreciate when our guests connect their journey to where they are today to the people who have inspired them, supported them, uplifted them, and the folks in your life sure sound incredible.
Yes, they were, ma'am. Like I said, I'm very blessed, and there are a lot of things I tell people I can relate to, and one of them is I can never understand put myself in their shoes when they're dealing with one parent or the lack of having that parental support, because both of them were there for me throughout for 53 years. So it's yeah, they're very impactful for sure.
All right, so we have to take a little bit of a pause here. First of all, Mike, I love that you shared both your career in education and how you came to do this community work with what you call the zone. But can you give us a little bit deeper of a dive on what the zone is, why it exists, and how schools are working together under this collaborative to better their collective impact or improve their collective impact?
Yes, ma'am. Rural School Innovation Zone was the first of its kind independent school district collaboration. It started in 2019 with the Mount Rushmores of the zone, right, which is Brooks County ISD, Fremont ISD, and Freer ISD. We've now expanded to add 2 school districts, Agua Dulce ISD and Benavides ISD, this last school year. So, like I said, we're now impacting 5 different communities and 4 different counties within the zone. And in rural South Texas, I'm assuming rural America, Mr. Wright's got a lot more experience in situation than I do, but I'm going to assume that the same resources and the same problems arise in every rural community around our wonderful nation. So we had limited capacity for resources as far as staffing and funding. And with the state accountability system in the state of Texas, we needed to decide on career pathways and giving our kids opportunities. I learned a long time ago from 2 people. One of them was on this podcast, Mr. Wright, and the other one was one of the godfathers of the zone, Steve Van Maitre. He's now the Toledo Midway ISD superintendent. But both of those guys taught me that our zip code should not stand to regulate what the outcomes for post-secondary success should be for our kids in rural South Texas, right? So Mr. Wright was a campus principal at the time when I first met him. He was running, Falfurrias High School and Ignite Technical Institute. And we opened up our doors in a handshake agreement to allow Fremont kids to go over there. And within that handshake agreement between Falfurrias and Fremont and Freer and Fremont with the Health Science Academy, that formulated kind of the hypothesis and an idea that resonated to become the Rural School Innovation Zone. That's been very heavily supported by TA Commissioner Dr. Mike Morath, and his staff. And Mr. Wright's got some great stories because he sits on Commissioner's Cabinet. And so he's there a lot talking about what we're doing. And we're really excited about the things that we're impacting, through our pathway system with health science. We have a STEM pathway, unmanned aerial flight, drones, cybersecurity, engineering. Our health science pathway, we graduate with EKG, phlebotomy, patient care tech, certified medical assistant certificates. Our welding academy, Ignite Technical Institute, where the P-Tech situation, we can graduate with up to 4 different certifications and an associate's degree, electrical certifications 1, 2, and 3, HVAC certifications 1 and 2. I mean, oh my God, Miss Hayley, it just goes on and on and on, right? And
yeah, but
it's
honestly, But honestly, I love that you're telling all this level of detail, because it paints such a clear picture to the work that you're doing and the impact that it's having. I'm going to put a pin in it for 1 second, and I'm going to just double click on the statement you made that zip code does not determine destiny. And that's something that I believe as a human being. It's a reason why I still exist in education the way that I do. I want to go to Richard for a second, and I want to ask you, I'm listening to this list. I'm a little bit of an outsider. I'm new to the zone. And it sounds incredible. What does it mean with your boots on the ground for you and your school district, Agua Dulce? And how has the zone really changed your leadership?
Well, this goes back to when I was a kid. I grew up in rural Wyoming. Okay, so rural Texas, rural Wyoming, same thing. I mean, there's a lot of space between a lot of people. We'll just put it that way. But what you learn at a very young age in a rural community is if somebody in your area needs help, you give somebody help. So Mike goes back to the initial handshake agreement that we had between Fremont High School and Falfurrias High School. Okay, they came over and asked me if they could send kids over there because they did not have access to welding programs that we had. It was no brainer. It took what, 2 seconds, Mike, for me to say yes. And they said, what about schedules? I said, don't worry about schedules. Just send your kids over here. We'll make it work. And guess what? It worked. And from that and from what took place in Freer, the zone grows into what it is now. And so without that type of attitude, you get in a bind. And one of the problems, it's not just in education, but we as a society now, we build our zones of excellence, all right? And we're not going to share with anybody. We're going to be really, really good at something. We're going to be really, really good at whether it's welding, or we're going to be really, really good at building this or building that, or whatever situation might be. And we don't want to share our toys with anybody else. That goes back to us being little kids. We don't want to share our toys. But the problem is with that mindset, as you said, not everybody in every zip code gets an opportunity to be successful that way. And so we have got to break down those barriers. And that's one of the things, having a rural background and coming and primarily doing most of my educational career in rural schools, you don't know how many times I had to pick up the telephone and say, I've got a bus broke down. Can you all come help me? I'm 250 miles away from my school district. I got a battery out. And sure enough, a school district will show up and put a new battery in my bus so I can get my kids home to where they need to be 250 miles away. Not every place does that. But one of the things we're blessed with down here, all of us being rural communities, we all understood the fact that it is important. If you have the resources, you have an obligation to help other people, not just your own students. And so with the zone, what took place was it grew into something bigger in that situation. And in Agua Dulce, I'm even smaller than all the other districts with the exception of Benavides. There is no way that I can afford a full-time welding instructor or a full-time medical assistant instructor, anything like that. It's impossible for me to put together. But I can afford $6,000 or $7,000 to be a part of the zone, transport my students over there, and then be able to work with those other folks. And so through the benevolence of the zone, they've taken in another district just simply because they have the same ideas that we do. If you see a need and somebody needs help, we're going to help them. And that's exactly what's taking place over here. And it's such it's not a novel idea. It's a Texas idea. It's a rural America idea. It's now state law. I mean, that's what Texas is founded on, is the individualism and everything else. And now sharing and helping each other, they've taken what we've created down here and put it into state law. We're one of the first in the state. There's a reason for that. We're named specifically in the legislation that was passed. Commissioner Morath talks about that. The lieutenant governor talks about that. The governor talks about that. Legislators talk about that, because they know in their hearts as well, if we're going to be successful as a collective, then we've got to make sure that everybody has the opportunity and the same resources to be successful in their educational growth. And that's where we're at with the zone. And that's what's catching on in the state of Texas, hopefully.
That's so beautiful. It is so poignant to hear a story about the way community exists in rural America that is maybe absent in other types of communities. When I first spoke to Michael about this episode and he was describing how the zone operates and the incredible leaders that are part of the zone, the first word that came to mind for me was collegiality, and just this like shared mindset of we're in this together and we're here to help one another so we can, I love to say, rising tides lift all ships, so that all our ships can rise.
Absolutely.
So what is it that you love about rural America? I mean, Richard, you're sharing that you grew up in Wyoming. What makes, in addition to this collegiality, what makes rural America unique? As I said before, I grew up in not a rural environment and I worked my whole school-based career in New York City. So definitely not rural. Can you describe for folks that are unfamiliar? I do have a large listener base out in New York. For folks that are unfamiliar, what is it like working in a rural school? Why is it beautiful? And then maybe what are some of its challenges?
Well, I don't know what your experiences were in New York, but did you live in a neighborhood
I lived in
up
an
there?
apartment building, a very tall apartment building.
Okay. And what was the vibe in that apartment building? Did y'all know everybody in that apartment building or not?
That's a great question. Thank goodness. In the last apartment building I lived in when I had my first kid, the neighbor across the hall had just had a baby, but that was the only neighbor I knew. And I brought over cupcakes for her the day she gave birth and came home from the hospital, but that was the only neighbor I knew. I literally, like, I would maybe nod my head at folks, but it was very, very quiet.
Okay. Well, in a rural community, I hate to tell you this, but if they found out you were having a baby, especially in South Texas, oh my Lord, you got 500 babysitters already. In fact, my children were raised by the kids in my school in Louise, Texas, just simply because that's where we were, man. And I could go to a basketball game and work the basketball game and not worry about my 2-year-old and my 4-year-old running around in the hallway because I knew they were well supervised by everybody who took them under their wing. That's just what you do in a rural community. That is the deal. And that's the part that you're not in it alone. Even the loners are not in it alone. And people talk about the rural mail carriers and stuff like that, knowing everything that's going on. Well, they do, and they'll drop a line to somebody and they'll say, hey, y'all need to go check on such and such because I haven't seen them out at their car or whatever. And so you don't know how many times somebody will find somebody sick or there's been an accident in the family or something that they didn't have time to let people know. And it's very hard to be private because everybody's all up in your business in a rural community. And some people don't like that. But on the flip side of that, there are times, even with cell phones and everything like that, you need some people up in your business in a rural community, just simply because something has gone on and you need some help and they don't know that. Or on the flip side of that, you're doing very, very well and you give back to your community. You're in a position to where you can help others out. As you said, rising tide rises all ships. That's what happens in a small community. You're always going to find somebody who's benevolent in that community that's going to help everybody out. I mean, it's just the neighborliness, I guess, for lack of a better term, is what makes rural communities so important. And it's cliche and corny and everything else, but it still exists today. And it still is a great part of why I want to be a part of rural communities. It's why I wanted my kids raised in a rural community, because they know everybody. And I'll be honest with you, it's a different time, it's a different place. I don't lock my car up. Okay, the keys are in it. If somebody needs to drive it, go grab it and take it and just let me know. It's just, that's the way it operates. I mean, it's the mindset you grow up with and everything else. And so I can't think of wanting to live in a different place just simply because of the personal interaction that you get, because we are social creatures. And with the advent of technology and everything else, we have drifted away from that. And we're losing a lot of our identity simply because we're not social creatures anymore. And you can't not be a social creature in a rural community, period, the end. It just doesn't happen because they're going to make you be social whether you want to or not.
All the introverts listening are like shuddering, but all the extroverts like
They-
myself are like, that sounds wonderful.
But they're
Michael, what
gonna
were you gonna
find some-
say? You're gonna jump
But
in
they're
there?
going to find an introvert who's like them. That's the thing. They're going to
Yeah.
find somebody who's like them, and
That's true.
they'll curmudgeon and sit across the room and not talk to each other and have a great
They'll
time.
just sit with their hands folded in the corner.
There's small examples, Ms. Hayley, throughout the zone and within the existence of the zone in the last 5 years. Small, for instance, I put out a group text. I have a group text for my superintendents. It makes it easy to communicate with everybody. I made them aware of some stuff going on, personally, and within 30 seconds after the message got sent, Mr. Wright calls me. Hey, just checking in on you. Everything okay? Yes, sir. We're good. Well, you were kind of vague in the text. Just want to make sure there's nothing else I can do. I'm like, no, I'm good. We're one of those situations, and it's like that. With the other four, and that's why we do so much great work for our kids within our communities. And by no means are we going to say it's all a bed of roses and we all get, we're singing kumbaya and holding hands, because if we didn't have some kind of heated discussion, we wouldn't make the best decisions possible for kids. So, but our rural situation allows us to come to the table and coexist with each other to make sure that those opportunities that are out there that everybody knows about, with everything going on through social media and those things, we're giving our kids in rural South Texas those opportunities. And I'll put my program against anybody in the entire nation. There's some of the things that we do, through the eyes of our superintendents and our local board members, and our campuses and our staff. It's amazing, because our welding teachers have physically gone to go see every football game that the kids that they teach go in, right? Because you're talking about a youngster coming in on a bus one way, an hour and 25 minutes, just to be part of a welding program. And that teacher has no responsibility after 4 o'clock,
Sure.
in theory, to be part of that kid's life. But what is he doing? He's out there watching a football game on a Friday night, someplace that he really doesn't have to be. Our nurse instructor, Lori Ruiz, is the athletic trainer at Freer High School. She's also our academy director, our health science academy director, very athletically inclined and oriented. So she's almost at every athletic event. It doesn't go beyond saying that every time it's an Agua Dulce girl or a Fremont girl against a Freer girl, there's a picture taken at the end of the game with the nursing director and the kids that are involved in the nursing program, the health science program, right? And you're talking about bitter rivals. I mean, you're not gonna get anybody more competitive than Richard Wright, Conrad Cantu, Dr. Body. He's laughing because he knows, because his desk is blurred or his background is blurred, but there's a nice little thing on the front of his desk that has 4 or 5 state championship rings in it. So you're talking about the ultimate competitor, because he's still coaching his powerlifting team as an assistant coach, as a superintendent. So that happens all the time within the zone. Yesterday, Mr. Cantu was from Freer ISD, was picking up 2 kids from the band competition and personally driving them down in a school vehicle to district track meet about 2.5 hours away. And you don't see that outside of rural America. You're not going to see the superintendent of schools roll up their sleeves and go do something a little bit extra just to make sure that our kids are not losing out on any opportunity available to them. And like I said, it's done like that times 5 in the zone, because the superintendents are amazing. Our staffs are amazing. The kids are, awesome. It's just a good situation to be around, because like I said, you don't want to be around us on a Tuesday or a Friday night when the pads are on, because, we're kicking and scratching and clawing for a victory. But the next day we're in class together and we're just shooting the breeze. We're talking, we're communicating, we're exchanging numbers. We're doing all those wonderful things, and nobody would ever consider what happened the night before. So it's an amazing situation when we start bringing rural America and especially South Texas together in a wide variety of ways that we're doing within the zone.
Well, not to brag, I drove from Austin to La Villa last night because I'm also the assistant track coach, and our 800-meter relay team kind of put it on Freer. So I'll just, Conrad was there. I patted
Well,
him
they're
on the
not
back.
here to defend themselves, so you go ahead.
Yeah, he can defend himself next week and just ask him how bad he got beat. And that's all you got to ask.
So
But they beat us in baseball last Friday, so I had to take that hickey doggone.
Not
it,
like
but
you're
anyway.
keeping the score. Not like I can't
Well,
even tell.
you
This
know,
competitive side of you
there's
is
certain
so
things.
murky.
Yeah, there are certain things that it is still America. There are no participation trophies down here. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so here's a question. Obviously, now we've alluded to you wearing a lot of hats. Can you paint a picture for what hats you wear, either planned hats or like today when you drove a school bus because we're short a
All right.
driver? Some
I will
unplanned.
give you my last 48 hours. Okay.
Yep.
It started here. I had some paperwork to do and put everything together. Well, it's, I guess, 72 hours. On Wednesday morning, I had to get everything lined out. Then I went to the band competition in Alice, Texas to support our band, and our band did very well. They got a 1 in sight reading and all that good stuff. I then left from Alice, Texas to drive to Austin, Texas, which is about 190 miles away, to set up a meeting so we could meet with the Commissioner of Education. I'm the designated Region 2 representative to be on the commissioner's cabinet for the state. Met with him at 11:30 until 11:30 yesterday. Got in my car, drove all the way from Austin, Texas, La Villa, Texas, which is near the border. So that was a 4.5 hour drive. Coached track with all of our kids, and they did extremely well, by the way. Our boys won the district championship. I'm not bragging or anything, but our boys won the district championship, and our girls were the
Good on
1600 meter relay champions. But anyway, we did very well at that. Got home last night at 11:30. Got up this morning because one of my bus drivers had to take kids to College Station in Floresville, Texas this morning. I would have picked up that trip, but I got in so late, I didn't think that I'd be able to do the 11:30 to 4 o'clock in the morning turnaround. So I drove her bus route this morning in the dark that I'd never driven before. I drove her bus route to get everybody here. And everybody, actually, we came to school 5 minutes early this morning. And now I'm talking to you lovely individuals. And in between all that, I had discussions about what the new testing will look like in the state of Texas with the commissioner, and several weighty issues of that, and whether we want to go back to a statewide curriculum again or something of that nature. And I had deja vu to 20 years ago when we tried it, it didn't work. So it's pretty entertaining. Shared all that. So that was my last 72 hours in a rural school district.
Wow.
And in between there, we did some discipline with some elementary kids. Oh, that's what I started my day out with on Wednesday, because we had some bullying issues going on at our elementary school, and I was filling in for the elementary principal because she was unable to be there. And so I met with all those parents and talked about those situations, and we mended those fences and sang Kumbaya and went on with our day.
Wow.
So that was my last 72 hours. So if that gives you the diversity of what a rural school superintendent does. And oh, by the way, this morning I had to go check and make sure the grass was cut and the drainage was good, because we have a baseball tournament here on
Saturday,
Friday, or tomorrow, Saturday. And we just built our baseball field a year ago, which we were the general contractors on. So if you want to know anything about Bermuda grass or
You
setting
know
grades,
everything.
or fence, or
It's
anything of
one of
that
your
nature, or how
topics
to
of
set calls,
expertise.
you're more than welcome to ask those questions, because I can give you an educated answer.
You know what? We're going to make that the follow-up podcast. We'll talk about grass in the next episode.
Okay, you're
We'll
more
talk
than
about
welcome
how
to.
long it takes to grow, how you care for
Absolutely.
it. They'll be in the next one.
Absolutely. Rain versus irrigated water. I got you.
Michael, how do you find time to convene your zone superintendents when they have schedules like these? Are you doing things virtually? Are you doing them in person? Like, tell me what that's like for you.
well, I mean, the schedule, Hayley, alludes to itself, right? I got 5 school districts and 5 days of the week, so pretty much everybody has their day. You know, I'm usually at Agua Dulce on Thursdays. I'm in Fowl on Friday. I'm on Mondays. I'm in Benavides on Tuesday. I'm in Fremont on Wednesday, and I'm in Freer on Friday. So within that context, like, again, phenomenal leaders that understand, the complexity of time. So it's a group text, a phone call on my way, on my hour trip or 25-minute trip, just checking in, making sure there's nothing emergency, in air quotes, that needs to be tended to. and we go from there. So, the agenda is easy. You walk in on a Thursday, you look for Mr. Richard Wright, wherever he's at. We walk and talk all the time because I understand his time's valuable, and we get a lot of stuff done. In junior high lunch duty, high school lunch duty, on the way to go check the ag department in his little gator. So there's a lot of things that get done within the context of those conversations. Then going to meet with the high school principals, wherever I'm at, then counselor, then try to meet as many of my kids as I can. So, we don't convene very often together, but when we do, it's impactful. We talk about scheduling for the next year. We talk about important factors, as far as, what's the next step for the zone. So again, it not that we're all in the same place at the same time, majority of the time, but social media, I mean, not social media, but just technology period has really allowed us to do some things that we don't have to physically be present to get done, but we take the context within, a vote per se, or what's going on. I mean, we're actually getting ready to, I'm in the middle of a group text right now. Region Service Center 2 is trying to align a symposium based around the zone concept and House Bill 2209, which is incentivizing rural collaborators in the state of Texas. And the zone is going to be the focal point. We'll be the experts of master schedule and collegiality, collaboration with our superintendents. So we're trying to set up some times and dates with a dinner on a Sunday night into a PD day on Monday. And Mr. Wright was tending to his business yesterday, so we didn't get a chance to talk. And I found out that he's got baccalaureate services on May 19th, that we might need to kind of fuzz the schedule a little bit so I can make sure he's available and a couple of his board members are available to be highlighted at the symposium. So that's the way we roll, like I said, because
it sounds like you make the best of it through the schedules that are available at your disposal.
Well, I mean, the good thing is, Ms. Hayley, is that the superintendents are very much aware of everybody's time, and they're mindful of that situation, and they're mindful, especially in my time. I mean, the amount of publicity that the zone has generated, in the last year has been phenomenal. I mean, enough that, for 2 solid weeks, I was not even in South Texas, per se. I was in Austin for South by Southwest. We had 3 presentations in South by Southwest. Then on Saturday, I'm getting flown out to Minneapolis, Minnesota, to go present at Mr. Wright's favorite people, Jobs for the Future, Pathways to Prosperity conference in Minneapolis, and going to Indianapolis, Indiana, to go present to RSIZ 32, which is another startup zone, outside of Texas. So it's just, they understand my schedule, they understand what we're trying to go do, and my superintendents understand, even though they're not very happy with me sometimes, they understand that the publicity that we're generating is leading to the legislation that just got passed in the state of Texas and the popularity that's growing with, and we're being highlighted a lot, and it's because of the work that my 5 district leaders and their local board members have allowed me and our teachers to go do. So it's an exciting situation, and time's valuable, and they understand that, and we work through it. Like I said, there's nothing that we haven't worked through. We're all together last Thursday, as a matter of fact. These guys sat on the panel. We had 62 distinguished guests visit the Rural School Innovation Zone and fed them lunch, a phenomenal lunch. And my 5 superintendents and a local school board member sat on the panel and had some very tough questions to answer from the crowd about how this whole thing got started. And so they did a phenomenal job. And what happened from there, conversations about, the next board meeting when it's to be on the agenda, making sure our RPEP, documentation and application is completely done. And so it's, like I said, we just take advantage of opportunities, whether it be a track meet, Hayley, or a baseball game. If I'm there, we sit together, and the good thing about knowing all the superintendents, I get a free pass into all the games. So it's makes it kind of fun.
So your weekends are very busy with sporting events, is what you're telling us.
Well, it's not hard to, yes, it is. But I'm the biggest athletic advocate outside the superintendents you're going to get, right? Because that's just the way I grew up. And so it's not hard for me to, when Mr. Wright says, hey, I got a great one this weekend, Friday, he had a good football game. He was on a roll, so I was on my way, and then I got a phone call. My dad got sick, so I had to call him, say, I'm not going to be able to make it. And I like watching our kids in action, right? Because that leads to that relationship building that we talked about being rural schools, right? Because I'm not from that community. I'm not from any of my 5 communities, but I am a rural ed student, right? I'm a rural ed kid. I grew up in a 682 population town and was bused 20 minutes away from my high school. So I
Wow.
understand what my kids go through and my parents see out of their eyes, because it's tough sending a 14-year-old kid an hour and 25 minutes, to go to a health science academy or to a welding academy, and not knowing those teachers and that those administrators. But what happens? My superintendents show up when we go visit other campuses, so their faces are familiar to the people that the parents that are sending their kids to their campuses, right? And that's very important. And that started 5 years ago, and Mr. Wright was the first one that came up with that idea for a family information session and taking the zone on the road. So we took the zone to Freer, we took the zone to Fowl, and we took the zone to Fremont to make sure that those communities had a face to everything that we were doing. Because in our area, that's important to when we're at Walmart or Stop and Shop or whatever, that they can see the AD and the maroon shirt and say, "Hey, are you Mr. Wright? You're superintendent of
Right.
schools at Agua Dulce, and you're
They
sending
make
your
that
kids to us."
connection.
Yes, that connection is amazing down here in rural South Texas. So that's a big deal for us, when we do those things.
That you really brought it full circle there to our first kind of commentary about the community and the collegiality. And you're painting a very clear picture that this doesn't happen by accident. It's very intentional. There's an investment of time and energy and resources to building those bridges and to maintaining those bridges, which I'm sure the listeners of the podcast understand, but I want to call out because it speaks to your character, both Richard and Michael, about your leadership, but also the leadership that you're exhibiting for the school leaders that are in the zone and probably other folks around you who maybe aren't in the zone and wish they were. I want to go back to one comment you made about technology. It is my experience that rural schools have a unique viewpoint on technology and the ability for technology to serve as a bridge. Is that how you feel, Richard? Is that something that your school has embraced, the use of technology to span geographic distances that you otherwise wouldn't be able to span?
Was that one for me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You cut out for me. Well, it's funny that you asked that. I was in a rural school 20 years ago in Louise, Texas, and we were fortunate enough that Wharton County Junior College wanted to run a pilot program with us on having virtual teachers teach our kids 22 years ago. And we found out then, because not a lot of the junior colleges wanted to embrace that. And we were so far ahead of the curve, nobody else was doing it. And so what you find is when you're in a rural community, you get innovative. And technology has made the world smaller for everybody. But in rural schools and in rural America, it's made it extremely more accessible than it ever could have been. We have students in our schools that have never been farther than 40 miles away in Corpus Christi, Texas. That's the biggest city they'll ever see. That's as far as they'll ever travel. But with the use of technology, I can put them in touch with somebody at UT, Texas Tech. We've had people, University of Colorado, things of that nature. We can shrink the world for them so that they have an opportunity to see those things. And that may just be the spark that gets them to leave Agua Dulce and go out and try something new and different that they never thought they'd have an opportunity for, because now we've shrunk that world to the point of they can see and experience something they never had an opportunity to see or experience before. So technology is imperative. And they've done a lot. I'll give Texas this. The pandemic really showed some of the holes in the infrastructure for our technology in rural America. And they did a really good job of working on connectivity for rural areas and getting us the materials and the supplies that we needed so that we could be connected. And so we can't do what we're doing. And we're talking in the zone about how we can do things virtually so we don't have to travel in certain areas. If there's a core class that can be taught over Zoom, we do that. So it's impossible to do without the technology. And again, shrinking the world is what we're doing, and it's really kind of a nice situation to be in. People can curse technology, but in this situation, we would not be as successful as we are without it.
Yeah, you're really echoing the experience I hear from a lot of our partners, which is that rural schools are, it's like, necessity is the mother of innovation or the parent of innovation. And rural schools have constrained geographic resources. Sometimes actual other resources are limited. Thus, you have to be innovative. And so you see a lot of the most creative, forward-thinking educational solutions born in the rural school environment. And I'm always so awed by it. Hence the desire to host this mini series, because I'm so awed by the way that rural schools and communities really think outside the box.
Well, but that you've got to understand, again, that's inherent in your rural communities, because we can't just run down to the Walmart and get what we need sometimes, because we don't have a Walmart. And so you've got to make do with what you have. So you're going to find people that are extremely creative and able to build and fashion things, and they may use something for something that was not its intended use. But all of a sudden we find out that, oh my goodness, we can use that here in this situation, and it works out very nicely. That's one of the things I do not think we will really understand. COVID had a very distinct, it changed the way we do a lot of things, okay? And it changed education. But I think in 15 years, the stuff that we had to do as a nation with going virtual and things of that nature is really going to change how education is looked at and thought of in 15 years, because of the things that we had to do, again, as you said, out of necessity to get access to our students. Well, rural communities were actually fighting that long before COVID came along.
Right.
And so
wasn't
some of the
new
best,
for y'all. Yeah. You're like,
that's right.
yes, and
yeah, some of the innovations were some of us poor country folks who we didn't have a choice before anyway. So come and learn something from us, because the interdependence is already there.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, to spiral off that, Mercedes, you're talking about, just the word innovation, and we've kind of gotten away from that just because that's part of the name, within the rural schools innovation zone. But taking the technology component and just wrapping around the concept of the zone, because the zone was enacted originally by Senate Bill 1882, which was created in district charters, right? So you needed an outside entity, which the rural school innovation was or is, to run the school. So I was basically superintendent in charge and writing of Falfurrias High School, Falfurrias Junior High, Fremont Collegiate High School, and Freer High School. But being a rural ed South Texas guy, I knew I couldn't run rogue over any of the districts or campuses and change a master schedule and or a calendar and things that were in writing that I could do, right? So I understood that we had to work together, and the way Mr. Wright and I handled things was much different than the way Ms. Garcia and I handled things, was much different than the way Ms. Hinojosa and I handled things, because a different relationship and different things, different factors in different communities. So that led to the evolution of where we're at right now through a performance agreement and not a contract obligation, right? And so we've run a hybrid model and been innovative even within the original idea of innovation and the rural school innovation zone period. So that's allowed us to do a lot of different things. And like I said, and we're always looking to take things to a different level. And Mr. Wright's one of them, as far as, the thinking of, do we really have to be that traveler in the principal's classes, the first part of a pathway class? If it's going to be a lot of lecture in that situation, can't we do that via Zoom and or Google Classroom or whatever that situation is? So, and we're very hands-on, as you can tell. I mean, we want to be there. We want our kids to be involved and to be a part of that situation. And so we've kind of alluded to the development or evolution of innovation on a daily basis, because we're always looking to take it to a different level in everything that we do. And like I said, classes being one of them, but just the dynamics and organizational chart and how we do things and how we fund things is our next step. And that's why I think, House Bill 2209 and the support that we receive from Representative Lozano and Senator Hinojosa, and getting this bill pushed through, you were going to see some of the dynamic work that superintendents of schools within the zone and the opportunities that we've afforded our kids over the last 5 years. It's incentivizing what we're doing today, and it's that carrot at the end of the stick for rural superintendents in the state of Texas that are going to be able to. Unfortunately, the dollar sign is going to bring people to the table. Let's just be completely honest. And when the dollar signs start flowing, it's a little bit easier to talk because in those things, because if you're working the mechanism right, the money's going to follow the kid, which is going to allow you to sustain a program like what we're doing right now, right? And you're not going to get anybody further removed from finances than Mike Gonzalez. And I tell this to everybody: if I knew I was going to deal with adults and money the way I've dealt with adults and money the last 5 years, I never would have taken this job. I never would have
But
applied
yet
for
here
it.
you are doing good for all. So I
Well,
love that though.
Yes, well, it's because we got great technical assistance providers that hold my hand through a lot of those things. But my leaders, the district leaders that I'm involved with, they're just very supportive, and it's carried over to the progress and the achievements and the accolades that our kids have received. I just have a list right now of 11 kids that are going to participate in Del Mar College graduation ceremonies for welding. This is our
Wow.
biggest cohort yet.
That's incredible.
So it's exciting when you have to go use your credit card to pay for cap and gowns for 11 kids, and that wouldn't happen. And let's be honest, that wouldn't happen if Mr. Van Matry had not called Dr. Casa to give me a permission to come and talk to Mr. Wright to figure out how to get Fremont kids to file for welding. The same way Mr. Van Matry and Mr. Cantu's conversation allowed me to go talk to Ms. Hinojosa to get Fremont kids, when I was a Fremont high school principal, to get them over there to the Health Science Academy. And that goes back to the relationships and rural communities, period, is that we were a phone call away and we could get in the truck and drive over. Because the first issue we ran into was the Fremont kids came back home and said, "Hey, sir, we didn't go to lunch." I said, "What do you mean you didn't go to lunch?" "Well, we didn't know when our lunch period was." I said, "Well, that's kind of funny because they feed kids in foul. I mean, why wouldn't you go get lunch?" "Well, nobody told us anything." So my knuckleheads sat in the classroom for the first day they were there. So they came home, so I called Mr. Wright. I said, "Hey, sir, do I have to send lunch to my kids?" He said, "No, Mike, dude, when are they here?" So I gave them the time they're here. He's like, "They'll go to second lunch." So what happens the second day? Mr. Wright personally went and got them from the classroom and made sure
Make
that
sure they ate their lunch. They
got to the cafeteria and had their own table at the beginning. And after that, you couldn't tell the difference between a Fremont kid and a foul kid because they were all intermingled. So again, going back to Mr. Wright's comments about just the relationship and people getting into people's business, it's a lot easier when you can pick up a phone and just have that direct conversation because we're here to help each other out. And if society had that kind of mindset, we wouldn't be in a situation of discrimination and kids having more than other kids just based on where they're at, right? And so I think we're breaking down those barriers going forward for a lot of things, and we're breaking down the situation where, like I said, I don't know anything else about education, and it was very easy for me as a principal to say, "Oh, that kid's an athlete. Oh, that kid, a band kid. That kid's an ag kid. That because they were very, segregated, and the zone's doing a phenomenal job of breaking down those barriers because out of the last 3 graduating classes, 23, 22, and 21, taking the top 30 kids, right? That's the top 10 kids from each of the districts involved in the zone. Out of the last 30 kids involved in that were high accolades, high academic students, 26 of them participated within zone programming.
Love
right?
it.
So you're talking about early college, high school kids being taught how to turn a screwdriver and what a drill is supposed to do, right? And those things. So, and we're doing that because of our leaders. We're doing that because people like Linda Hinojosa and Claudette Garcia and Richard Wright and Connie Adeta, and they're formulating and pushing that opportunity for kids going forward from the principal standpoint, going down to our counselors, and it's like, why wouldn't we take advantage of these things?
Yeah.
And
It
that's why
sounds
we
like there are
posted.
so many more opportunities for schools that are involved in the zone to be able to collaborate. And that's exactly why I wanted to host this discussion. Once Mike told me a little bit about what it all shakes out to be. Now, I hate to do this, but we're at the very end of our conversation, and I have one final question, which is my forever final question, but I'm going to tailor it to this audience of guests, these panelists. What advice would you give a rural school leader starting their career today? So let's keep this like one sentence, one piece of advice you would give a rural school leader starting their career today. Mike, I'll start with you.
Step out of your comfort zone. Be a champion for kids.
I love it. I love it. How about you, Richard?
I'm going to quote one of the great philosophers of the 20th century. Have y'all ever watched the movie Joe Dirt?
Yes.
Life's a garden, dig it, and you can't have no in your heart. You're done. You live by those two things, rural schools take care of themselves, man.
I love that. Well, I have never had Joe Dirt quoted on this podcast before, but
That's what I'm
for
talking about, man.
everything.
You gotta go out of the box.
Yes. Michael, Richard, thank you so much for joining today. You have been incredibly wise, and you've shared such beautiful both anecdotes and philosophies about your work. I really appreciate you being here with me and with our podcast listeners.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am.
And thank you, everybody who joined us. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.